In this video I'm going to be restoring this old oak wooden box. I'll talk more about the story behind this box at the end of the video, but for now let's get on with the project. The box wasn't in too bad shape, but it did have some water and heat marks on the lid. There's also a large crack on the bottom, and the inside was a bit messy. It looks like someone started to strip out whatever was there originally but never finished the job. These brass hinges are nice but in need of a clean up, as is the lock here on the front. Unfortunately there's no key for the lock either. I started by removing the lock and the hinges, and I'm going to be using Brasso to clean them up. It took a while to do this by hand, and in hindsight I could have set up a polishing pad in a drill and maybe used some kind of abrasive paste to do this a little quicker. But anyway, the brass cleaned up really nice. I wanted to clean up the screws too, but after rubbing the heads on some 600 grit wet and dry paper, it turns out these screws are not solid brass. I guess they must have been brass plated instead, which is a shame. I didn't have any brass screws to hand, so for now I'm just going to put these back in, and I'll buy some brass ones later to replace them. The hinges got the same treatment with Brasso, although it was a little bit trickier to get into all of the nooks and crannies, so I used a small screwdriver to help. Next I gave the box a light sanding, first with 120 grit and then 240, because I'm going to be applying an oxalic acid solution to help remove the stains, and I want the solution to be able to penetrate the wood through the old finish. And I'm not sure what finish was on it originally. I think it was probably wax, because it did kind of gum up the sandpaper pretty quickly. Then I went to grab some hot water, and into that I mix in some oxalic acid. I never measure this out, but I'm guessing it was maybe 15% acid to 85% water, and then I mixed that up. I used a paintbrush to apply it, and as the wood soaks it in, I just keep recoating over the entire box to keep it wet while the acid does its thing. I let it sit for maybe 15 minutes and then I wiped it away with a paper towel, and the stains looked less noticeable, but I could still just about see them, so I decided to recoat it again and let it sit for longer this time, maybe about half an hour. And this time, after wiping away the solution, the stains seemed to have completely disappeared. So then I rinsed off all of that acidic water, and it's important to use gloves and a respirator while working with oxalic acid. Then I left the box out in the sun to dry off. This is how it looked dry, and it had lost some of its original colour, so I decided to use some walnut stain on it. After applying it, I wiped away the excess stain. And then I left it out in the sun again to dry off. And once it was dry, here you can see those water or heat marks, whatever they were, had now completely disappeared. Next I'm going to use some 4/0 steel wool to apply some of my handmade oil wax mixture. This stuff is available to buy via my Etsy store if you're interested. I'm using the original formula here, which is a mixture of boiled linseed oil, beeswax and white spirit, which speeds up the drying time a little. Usually I use a cloth to apply it, but the steel wool is going to help keep everything nice and smooth, and it's also going to help even out that stain a little bit. And the oil in the wax brought back more of an amber colour tone to the box, which I really like. I then immediately wipe off any excess wax because I want a nice thin even coat of wax, and then I can start buffing it out with a clean cotton cloth to give the box a nice subtle sheen. On the underside of the box, this piece of mitered trim at the back has quite a lot of figure in the wood grain, and the wood has basically moved over time, and that's left a bit of a gap along the back here. There's also quite a large crack. I've thought about making a new piece to replace this, but because it's at the back and on the bottom, it's not really all that visible, so I think I'm just going to put some epoxy in this crack to help stabilise it. Here I'm mixing up the 2-part epoxy. This is just the cheap stuff you can buy at a pound shop, but it actually works really well as long as you mix it up thoroughly. I wedged a screwdriver in and got as much in there as possible before adding clamps. After about an hour I removed those and started to clean off the excess. After doing some sanding, I applied some walnut stain to the area to blend it in, and here's how it turned out. The next job was to clean up the inside of the box, and I started using my scraper first, but that wasn't really working, so I came back with the heat gun to help loosen up whatever glue had been used on this box originally, and that took some time, but it worked great in conjunction with the scraper. The inside of the lid had a piece of cardboard glued on, so I removed that too in the same way. I decided to clean up and stain the inside edges of the box too. And then I applied some masking tape because I didn't want to get any wax on the inside of the lid or the bottom, but I did want to wax the sides. I'm going to be using some of this felt from my local craft shop to line the inside of the lid and the bottom. It's available in loads of different colours, but I chose green because that's my favourite colour. I started by measuring and cutting the felt to the width of the box using a sharp knife and a framing square. And then I could offer it up to the inside and make some marks for the length of the box and make that cut too. And then I positioned it again and marked up the angled corners, and I just cut those with some scissors. I'm going to use some of this spray adhesive to stick the felt down, and this was from my local pound shop too. I sprayed it on the surface, being careful not to get it onto the side panels, and then I applied it to the back of the felt too, making sure to get plenty of glue around the edges. I left the glue for about 1 minute when it started getting tacky, and then I could carefully position it. Timing is important here because I didn't want it to be so tacky that it would stick instantly, because I needed a bit of time to reposition it to get it placed correctly. Fortunately, felt is quite a forgiving material to work with. It's got a bit of give in it, a bit of stretch, so I was able to get it placed nice and tidy without any issues. I added a bit of weight and then left it for a while, and then I could do exactly the same to the inside of the lid too. Here are a few photos of the finished box, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. This box was given to me by a friend who found it in a charity shop for a couple of pounds, but he was having a bit of a declutter at home and he hadn't had a chance to do anything with it, so he kindly gave it to me. He told me that he thought it was a vintage oak cutlery box, and there are a few markings on the box near where the lock is, and it looks to be made here in Britain. And having done a bit of googling on this reg number, I found this set with the same number, and it says early 20th century, so that's some indication of how old this box might be. That's about as much as I've found out so far, but if anyone has any more info, please do let me know in the comments. I'm not sure what I'll do with this box in the long run, but for the time being I'm going to use it as somewhere to store my stickers and business cards and postage labels for when I send out the items that I sell on Etsy. Nick, who gave the box to me, is a very talented photographer and writer, and he runs an excellent website called Invisible Works with some fascinating articles and visuals about our local history here in Norfolk where I live. I know that a few people who watch my channel are from around these parts, so I thought I'd mention it. I recommend checking it out, and I'll include a link to that in the description box below. That's it for this one. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already for more weekly woodworking videos. You can also support the channel on Patreon if you'd like to receive early access to my videos, project plans and cut lists, exclusive content and a name credit at the end of my videos. Thank you for watching.